My name is Kayla,
And I'm Katherine.
and we're going to be speaking to you about the holy trinity of Cucumber, or collaborative Cucumber practices to increase BDD.
So really quickly, we'll start with intros on who we are and how we work together. And then we're going to present 2 case studies from our work at Originate, which is also an agency, and show you how we've put in place collaborative Cucumber practices, kind of by accident, but it fell into place and is working pretty well now. And then we'll finish with some final thoughts that will hopefully allow you to try out these practices and processes if you think it would be valuable for your work setting. And like we said before, my name is Katherine Bomkamp. I'm based in Washington, D.C. That doesn't necessarily mean I work on projects in the D.C. area. Since we are an agency, we have offices all over, and we take projects all over as well. Originate is a software innovation studio. We create high-value products for high-value clients and partners. I've been with the agency for a little over 2 years. My background was in biomedical engineering and hardware development, and then I made the jump to working in software.
I'm Kayla. I am also product quality manager at Originate. I studied human-computer interaction at UC Berkeley, focusing mostly on the human side, steering clear of the computer side until now. My background is I worked at a work happiness company called Whoopa, as well as Dropbox for a little while, and now I spend my days in our San Francisco office.
So Kayla and I have an amazing manager and mentor. His name is Chris Mounier, and he hired us with the goal of increasing collaboration between product and engineering. And when I was first brought on, I had absolutely no idea how to do this. And then we started learning more about Cucumber and the collaborative nature of the tool.
So writing a single Cucumber test can be an incredibly collaborative process. And we're going to show you 2 case studies of how we've used Cucumber to increase collaboration between product and engineering.
So our first case study is titled, Hey, We Should All Be Friends. This project was the start of our exploration into collaborative Cucumber, which we fell into completely by accident, but we involved all 3 amigos, or amigas. I won't go into great detail about the product that we were building because it kind of is inconsequential to the story, but it was in the reinsurance industry. It was fascinating. And we were building a big data platform for one of the largest names in reinsurance. It was my first project at Originate, and I was excited to be working on an agile team, but I can honestly say on the scale of agile to waterfall, this was Niagara Falls. So when I joined the project, this is a graphic of how our communication was flowing. We had engineering and product not talking to each other very much. It was a really complicated platform. Our product manager was writing short novels when it came to feature tickets that were entered into Jira. Our overworked and stressed out developers were reading about a third of the ticket because they were so long, throwing some code out there and just hoping it stuck. The ticket would get to me as the quality manager to review and test, and I realized I was becoming the interpreter and the referee between these 2 groups of people. The product owners were caught with product priorities against competing engineering burn rates, and velocities. So stories weren't being written to optimize development time, and engineers were working at such a furious pace that important features were being overlooked as a result. So I spent a lot of time going between the groups of people to get everything right. And I don't think this is a unique situation. I think a lot of teams find themselves in this kind of communication breakdown. So this was originally our workflow. So the ticket would go from in progress, ready for QA. It would fail QA. If it failed, it went back to in progress. If it was ready for product, the product manager would accept, and then we would consider that completed. So you'll notice automated testing is missing here. There's not a lot of communication between the different groups, but this is pretty standard. I think a lot of people find themselves like kind of defaulting into a workflow like this. And we'll come back to this graphic in a bit. So this is a good example of our before process. And I will tell you that this is not even half the ticket. a user story with my like very bland, like generic user that doesn't give much insight into the story or why we're creating this. We have a laundry list of acceptance criteria that really drill into like tiny design details that just make you want to scream. And yeah, this isn't even half of it. So this is not right. Yeah. So I started by auditing our workflow process when I found myself in this situation. You could see why our engineers were skimming these tickets and not reading them fully and just kind of putting something out there. I would have to kick it back for a really small reason, like this icon isn't blue enough. So whether a feature test was written for something like this or not, who knows? Actually, I do know, and it was not. So I started by auditing our process. Where are our pain points? Where are things breaking down? I realized we were highly ineffectual between velocity and adding QA time into story points. I went to our product manager, who's a really forward-thinking PM, and told her I wanted to radically change up our process. And I knew I wanted to start every ticket with thinking about BDD and test-driven development. So this was part of our solution. What was written here is not very important. The important part are these comments. So this is engineers, developers, product managers, and designers all talking about Gherkin. I would start with getting a feature from a product manager. I would write the Gherkin for that feature. Then we would all have a round of commenting. We would all go into it. We would talk about what that feature is, why we're doing it. The point was not to have perfect syntax or formatting. The point was to talk about it. And probably example mapping is a better way of doing that now. But this was kind of our first try at this. And we did it in Google Docs, also not very efficient, but it was something we all had a baseline knowledge of. I didn't want to immediately jump to GitHub because that would leave our designers and our product managers kind of out of the loop there. So we're teaching from each other, we're learning from each other, and we're actually moving this forward. And so we changed our tickets. This is what they then looked like. So we actually wrote the Gherkin scenarios as the ticket itself. So you have a much more effective user story. We have 2 rules instead of a laundry list of acceptance criteria. We have a scenario and then a linked mock. Like, it's not perfect. The point was never to be perfect. It was, let's start by thinking about creating a test for this. It gave me a lot more comfort knowing that this feature was a lot less fragile come development or come release time. You know, this was something I didn't have to go into as great of detail manually testing, because obviously that is the most expensive form of testing. And so we then added to our process. So this middle process stayed the same, but we added these top 4 boxes through our collaborative Gherkin writing. And then we also added this bottom process as well. So I want it to be a lot more active in GitHub. So when these feature tests were being written, I would get tagged in them. And then I would go into GitHub, and yes, we'd collaborated on this, we had written it together, and I would make sure that, hey, there hasn't been changes to this feature since this has been written, or there haven't been updates to it. And then our product manager would review and update us and keep us in the loop if there were changes that would impact this test. So the takeaways from this case study is start by looking at your current process. Look at where problems are happening, expose your pain points, redesign your workflows, and don't be afraid to rattle some cages, especially in a waterfall setting. People are not comfortable with this, and that's okay. And there's going to be mistakes in the process, and that's also okay. Collaborate in whatever way is most natural for your team to allow for everyone to join in. So whether that's starting a Google Doc, making comments in InVision, or opening a GitHub issue or PR, start at a baseline place where everyone can contribute. And this sounds like a no-brainer, but it's often overlooked. The more you involve everyone, the more ownership everyone feels over the quality of the product you're building. So you'd be surprised at how many product managers don't want to be in Jira all day or in Trello all day and would like to learn what's happening in GitHub so that they can speak more effectively to those things.
Okay, so the second case study is called If You Try, It's As Easy as Veggie Pie. It's about my first project at Originate and my first exposure to behavior-driven development, Gherkin, Cucumber, the whole shebang. And I joined this project 9 months into our partnership. So this is a picture of me when I first joined Originate. I had very little technical experience in my arsenal. Sure, I could write hello world in Python, but that was really about it. And I also had no clue what my job entailed. Product quality sounded really cool, and I somehow convinced my manager to hire me, and I quickly learned that they hired me because of my willingness to learn and explore and get my hands dirty. So my first project was in the real estate information business, very exciting. I was told the project was placed on had just recently scrapped all their feature tests and desperately needed a quality manager to come up and clean the mess. Also, our tech lead was leaving for China and would be off the grid for a couple months, so that was a really cool position to be in, right? Luckily, I didn't have to go through this alone. I had Katherine, and she taught me everything she knew and made the process really easy and fun. I initially invested a lot of time in exploratory testing, learning the ins and outs of the product, why they built what they'd built, how we could improve things moving forward. I watched Cuken school videos, started learning about Gherkin and understanding where Cucumber came into the equation. I had one-on-ones, or what I like to call dos amigos meetings, with the product manager and when the tech lead returned to understand what was going on. And soon enough, I set up my own Scratchpad and started writing some scenarios. In Katherine's footsteps, and with a shiny idea from our boss friend Chris, we took the collaborative process one step further. Quality managers in GitHub. No, not quality engineers. Non-technical product quality managers. And I'll admit it was very, very scary. But once I realized that everyone has to learn how to use GitHub, and I was not the first person to do so, it made the process a lot easier. I decided to take some deep breaths and go along with the process. And it was actually really, really cool and exciting. And within the first hour of submitting my first PR, I had my first round of comments and was also met with a lot of enthusiasm about getting non-technical team members into GitHub, writing Gherkin, and being part of the process. We quickly defined best practices and grew living documentation about how we would write our Gherkin, our preferred styles and methods, and defining the definition of ready of getting the Gherkin into GitHub. And slowly but surely, we caught up with all that great 9 months of testing debt, and we're automating tests that had been manual for a very long time. It was overall a very cool and rewarding experience, as easy as veggie pie. So key takeaways: if you can write in English, you can write Gherkin. Having a non-technical background in the tech industry can be very intimidating and scary. But if you break it down and start with the basics, it's a lot easier. And talk to your developers and learn to speak their language. As cliche as it is, communication is key, and writing Gherkin isn't a journey you want to go through alone. And there's nothing to be nervous or shy about, seriously. Ask for help, and you'll only make your relationships with your team members stronger. Some of the best learning experiences I had were when I would hop on a call with one of our developers and share my screen of what I'd written, and we'd go line by line and do these little code reviews, and it was really fun, and you really build that relationship, and they understand where you're coming from when they're reading what you wrote.
So in summary, build meaningful working relationships with everyone on your team, not just the people that you are directly working with, because you will need their help someday, and it makes collaboration so much more natural. And communication flows a lot easier.
Involve everyone, technical and non-technical roles. Everyone has the potential to add value to the product and the process, and a fresh set of eyes is never a bad thing. One thing that our manager always tells us is that asking for help is the greatest sign of maturity, and no one's going to tell you you look stupid. hopefully.
And lastly, they're the three amigos, not the three adversaries. So if you find yourself in a situation like I did, where it's a product manager versus a developer, run. No. Use it as an opportunity to audit your workflow and your processes and find ways to make it more collaborative and harmonious for everyone involved. Thank you for your time and attention.